our CDA webinar series 2024, presenting today the CDA verification visit and inside look. We have the pleasure to welcome each of you, and we bring you greetings from our CEO, Dr. Calvin Moore Jr., and our Vice President of Programs, Abina Okran Jackson. We are pleased to be here to present to you this session. And with us, we have also Raquel Andrade. Raquel? Raquel is the Director of Credentialing, and we have the pleasure to have her here because she knows everything about this subject.
Yes. Sorry, good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. As Vilma said, I'm the Director of the Credentialing Department, and it's great to be here with you all today.
Okay, and I am Vilma Williams, Senior Manager for the Early Childhood Education Content and Special Populations. So before we start, I want to talk with you about some logistics that information you need to have. I know that you probably want to know about your certificates of attendance. We will offer certificates of attendance to all of you who will remain in the session until the end. And if you have registered with your name. If you have not registered with your name, if you or any other way, you need to go back to your registration later on and put your name so that your certificate will have your name. Expectance of certificates is like 1 week from today. Also, if this presentation is being recorded and is going to be available for those who are members of CAN, you will have that recording available. If you are not a member of CAM, hold on, because at the end of the presentation, towards the end, we're going to tell you how to join CAN so you can have all these benefits for free. Also, Raquel and I would like your questions. As we move along in the presentation, we will try to answer as many questions as possible that are pertinent to the subject that we're going to be talking about, and we're going to try to answer the questions. Please use the button that says questions and answers on your screen. Chat, because we will not be reading the questions from the chat. We will be reading them from the questions and answers. Okay, so we're going to start now with the presentation. The objectives for today are we would love for you at the end of the presentation to have gotten a comprehensive explanation of the ready to schedule notice. And briefly, we're going to discuss how to proceed after you receive it. And we will provide you an overview of the verification visit process. So the Council for Professional Recognition, as you know, is the entity that awards the CDA credential, and we award it to candidates or educators who work with children and families in different settings. We have a credential for center-based settings on the left side, for those who work with children who are preschoolers, 3 to 5. Also, we have a credential for candidates who work with babies and toddlers, infants and toddlers, from birth to 36 months. We also have a credential for those educators who work in family child care settings with children anywhere from birth to 5 years old. And lastly, we have a credential for home visitors, who are those educators that work with adults. They educate the adults to learn the skills they need to work with their own children, and they work with families who have children ages birth to 5 years old. So determining the credential type that you would like, what type of credential, is extremely important, because once you make this decision, you have to make sure that all your preparation to meet all the requirements is for that type of credential. So when you decide what credential type do I want to earn, and you select it, you will be determining what training courses you have to complete to meet the requirement of education. In what setting and age group you will need to complete your experience, 480 hours of experience. What book do you need to purchase? The book is called the Competency Standards book. which requirements you need to follow to prepare for your portfolio? What type of PD specialist you need to select? What exam you will be to complete? And in what setting and age group you will be observed? In a few words, all requirements must be completed for the setting and age group of the credential type that you select. And the requirements are setting and age specific. The thing that we need to consider is the language specialization. The language specialization or the language of the assessment is determined by the language that the candidate is required to consistently use daily with children and families. The language for your assessment is not determined by your personal preference or the language the candidate feels more comfortable speaking or the language the PD specialist feels the candidate speaks best or the language in which the candidate would like to take the exam. Again, language specialization determines the language the candidate must use with the children during the verification visit and also in the preparation of the professional portfolio. So I mentioned the competency standards books, and these are the competency standards books. They are required to prepare and apply for the CDA credential. Each of these books is for a different setting. Although they look alike, the content differs from one setting to another setting. And these books include specifics about how to prepare, for example, the professional portfolio. They contain detailed instructions about the CDA credentialing process, the CDA verification visit and exam, the CDA application and the required forms such as family questionnaires, reflective dialogue worksheet, and the official comprehensive scoring instrument that we will explain to you in a little while. All those forms are in the back of this competency standards book. How do you obtain these books? They are available for purchase on our council website in our bookstore. You have to select also a professional development specialist with the same type of endorsement like preschool or infant toddler or family child care or home visitor. In the same language specialization as the credential type you're applying for. You have to select a PD specialist who has no conflicts of interest with you, the candidate. So what are conflicts of interest? There are situations that will not allow the professional development specialist serve as a professional development specialist for the candidate. So we're going to call them PDS, professional development specialist, or PDS for short, may not serve as a candidate CDA PD specialist if the PD specialist is the candidate's relative by blood, marriage, or any other legal relationship, if the PD specialist is the direct supervisor, or teacher, trainer, or a director, or a center employee, for example, a co-worker in the same group, classroom, or center site in the program. Or if the candidate is the employer of the PD specialist, right? That is a conflict of interest. So the PDS may not serve a candidate if the PDS has a child in the candidate's class or group. And or if the candidate has served, if the PDS has served the candidate before as a PD specialist, whether the candidate applied for another CDA credential or in the past, and the candidate is reapplying for the same credential. Okay, so those are the conflicts of interest. More conflicts of interest. If the PDS has a financial or contractual interest related to the candidate or may benefit in any way from the candidate's credentialing decision, cannot serve. Or if the PDS is a person who may have a personal or professional bias toward or against the candidate or any group of which the candidate is part, such as peer, friend, etc. If the PDS is a licensing agent that has conducted a review or an inspection or anything like that in the candidate's program, in the past 2 years. That person cannot serve as a PD specialist. So what I'm showing you here is a graphic of all the steps and the parts of this assessment and the steps the candidates need to go through to get assessed and to earn the CDA credential. As you can see, these stages for the assessment are color-coded, and in Paul, you have the preparation. That's when candidates prepare. Once they are prepared and they select their PD specialist, they apply, and that's the green stage here. And then once they apply, they will receive a notice saying, candidate, we approve your application, everything is fine, and now you can proceed to have your final assessment, right? And the final assessment consists on what is orange, the demonstration. The candidate now has to demonstrate the skills, the knowledge, the experience, and everything in 2 different ways: by having a CDA verification visit that is conducted by a PD specialist, and by taking a CDA exam in a computer, our facility called Pearson VUE. But today, we're going to concentrate on the CDA verification visit. That is the session for today. So what happens during the CDA verification visit? Everything you want to know, that you need to know. And again, the PD specialist is administering this CDA verification visit. And lastly, I'm going to show you the same steps in a different way, like 1, 2, 3 in dark green are the requirements. The people have to prepare, the candidates have to prepare, they have to have, meet the requirement to be able to read, write, speak the language of the assessment, have education, they have to complete 120 hours. And number 2, they have to have some experience. Number 1 can be met at any time before the application. Number 2 has to be made within 3 years before the application, and that is the work experience, 180 hours. And number 3, the candidate needs to prepare a professional portfolio within 6 months before they apply. And when they have all of this, in number 4, the candidate selects a PD specialist and completes the application. And on number 5, the application comes to the council and we approve, between 4 and 5, we approve the application, the candidate gets the notice that it's approved, proceed, and then the candidate moves to number 5, which is the final assessment, consists in 2 parts, CDA verification visit exam, and then when results are completed, the results are sent to the council, and on number 6, the council makes the final decision to award the credential or not. And you can see here that between 4 and 5, before the verification visit and the exam take place, the candidate will get a ready to schedule notice. And Raquel is going to talk to us about that. And today we're going to, again, concentrate on the CDA verification visit. So Raquel is going to talk to us about the ready to schedule, and then I'm going to talk to you about the demonstrating piece. Raquel?
Thanks, Vilma. So as Vilma mentioned, the ready to schedule notice is what authorizes the candidate to schedule both their verification visit and their exam. So prior to submitting and paying for the application, there should not be a verification visit or an exam. But essentially, the ready to schedule notice sends an exam authorization to Pearson VUE, and our system also sends the PD specialist a ready to schedule notice to let that PD specialist know that the candidate can now schedule their verification visit, that they have been authorized to schedule a visit. So the ready to schedule notice also includes information on how to schedule the verification visit with the PD specialist and how to schedule the CDA exam at a Pearson VUE testing center. In addition, the ready to schedule notice also includes the candidate ID number, which the candidate will need to schedule their exam with Pearson VUE, and Pearson VUE customer support contact information. And of course, it also includes the contact information for the PD specialist. The order in which the exam and verification visit are completed does not matter as long as both are completed within the 6-month deadline that is provided to the candidate after they pay for their application. So we do have some recommendations. When the candidate receives the ready to schedule notice, always be aware of your 6-month deadline. 6 months is half a year to complete both the exam and the verification visit. So it is ample time to complete both, and you do want to be aware of your 6-month deadline. So if you need to, you can set reminders in your phone in terms of when that deadline is coming up. You also want to schedule your exam and verification visit appointments as far in advance as possible. So if you receive your ready to schedule notice today, potentially you could call Pearson VUE tomorrow and say, I'd like to schedule an exam for 3 months from now. Or you could reach out to your PD specialist and schedule a verification visit 2 months from now. But the idea is that you already have something scheduled, because when candidates wait until the last minute or very close to that 6-month deadline, sometimes the PDS does not have availability, or particularly at Pearson VUE, they may not have availability for 2 weeks. And so you want to be very aware of that 6-month deadline, because we rarely grant extensions. So again, schedule as soon as possible, as far in advance as possible. You also want to review your ready to schedule notice to make sure that the name that is in your ready to schedule notice matches the ID that you will be taking to Pearson VUE exactly. Because the name in the email is the name that Pearson VUE has. And if you take an ID that does not match that name exactly, they will not let you test that day, and you will end up having to pay an additional $65 to retake or to get a new exam authorization. So always review your ready to schedule notice. Any discrepancies in your name, don't schedule anything, and contact the council for further instruction on how to get your name corrected or updated. All right, so talking a little bit more about that PD specialist ready to schedule notice. When the candidate receives their ready to schedule notice, the PD specialist will also receive a notice. And basically it's informing the PD specialist that they can now schedule the verification visit with the candidate. Prior to that, the PD specialist cannot schedule the verification visit, and a verification visit can definitely not even take place prior to receiving this notice.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we're going to talk about the last portion of that graphic that I show you, the demonstrate. And how do you demonstrate now that you're competent so you can earn your CDA? Is 2 ways, like these 2 pieces of a puzzle. One is the CDA verification visit, and one is the exam. Raquelita, do we have any questions before I move on?
No, Vilma, we don't have any questions right now.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to be checking for questions, remember, right? Write your questions on the question feature. Okay, so to understand the process of evaluation, we need to talk about the CDA competency standards. So candidates are evaluated, and actually they have to demonstrate that they meet the CDA competency standards to earn a CDA credential. The CDA competency standards were developed in the very, late 70s, early 70s, and they are the backbone of the CDA credentialing system. They are the national standards that we use to evaluate the candidate's performance with children and families during the assessment process, right? So everything the candidate prepares, everything the candidate goes through during this assessment is based on these competency standards. In other words, the candidate has to meet these competency standards. And the competency standards include 6 competency goals that you see here on the left side. And each of these goals, because they are, standards, they're national, they're goals that are very broad. So we have defined them on the right side as functional areas. The functional areas describe more in detail what do we mean by this goal. And they are more in detail in regards to functions of the educator. So everything is going to be based, all the assessment is going to be based on these goals. Are you able to establish and maintain a safe, healthy learning environment? Can you prove to us that you can advance physical and intellectual competence with children? Are you able to support social and emotional development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? I don't wanna read all of them. I just want to point that the first 3 competency goals are based on the candidate's relationship and interactions and performance directly with children. Number 4 is the candidate's performance with the families. 5 and 6 is the candidates as a professional, so these two are going to be based on providing, demonstrating, yes, I can run in my classroom or in my group or in my case, of families, if you're a home visitor. Yes, I can run a purposeful program that is responsive to the participants' needs. And number 6, the candidate focuses on professionalism, and the candidate focuses on her commitment or his commitment to the profession. So that is why the competency standards are so important. The candidates have been preparing, have studied, so that they can demonstrate, yes, I got to this point where now I can tell the council, I can show the council that I meet all of these standards. So I mentioned to you already that they are composed by 6 competency goals that measure the candidate's performance. And each goal has several functional areas. Some have only one, the last ones. And all CDS work to meet this and demonstrate these standards. Competency goals, functional areas. Okay. So the candidate's final assessment consists of 2 parts, as I mentioned before, the verification visit and the CDA exam. They were designed based on these competency standards. So they were designed based on the 6 competency goals and the 13 functional areas. Therefore, the candidate must demonstrate their competence through the preparation of the portfolio. Guess what? The portfolio is also based on these competency standards. The observation is also based on these competency standards, and so is the CDA exam. So now we're going to talk about the verification visit, and we're going to talk about the purpose of the visit, which is for the PD specialist to verify the key aspects of the candidate's professional competence. So the PDS follows this model that is called ROR to administer the verification visit. The first R means review the candidate's portfolio to make sure that it meets all the requirements. The O stands for observe the candidate working with children as the lead teacher. And the R is reflect with the candidate and help the candidate identify areas of strength and areas of future growth so that the candidate can set professional goals for themselves. And the PD specialist will be assessing the candidate based on the 6 competency standards, 6 competency goals and functional areas. And the PD specialist is going to be using a special instrument called comprehensive scoring instrument. And that is what is going to guide the PDS to provide recommended scores and comments. Once the verification visit is completed, the PD specialist will submit the scores to the council online within the next 2 days. And the specialist must conduct only one verification visit at a time. So for center-based, what does this mean? So for center-based, the candidate should be working or volunteering in a center-based program, not in a home, in a center-based program. Candidate must have the preschool competency standards book, color green, and the portfolio, the professional portfolio should have been prepared based on those requirements stated in that preschool competency standards book. The candidate will be observed working as a lead teacher in a center-based program with a minimum of 8 children, all of whom are between the ages of 3 to 5 years old. Center-based infant toddler now. Candidates who work with babies from birth to 36 months should be working or volunteering in a center-based program, not in a home. Candidates must have the competency standards book for infant toddlers. That's a yellow book. They must complete a professional portfolio. They have to prepare it based on the requirements in that book. And the candidate is going to be observed working as a lead teacher in a center-based program with a minimum of 3 children, all of whom are between the ages of birth and 36 months. In the case of the family child care verification visit, people who apply for that setting, Candidates should be working or volunteering in a family childcare home, not in a center. Candidate should have the competency standards book for family childcare, blue, with a blue book, and the professional portfolio should have been prepared based on the requirements in that family childcare competency standards book. Candidates will be observed working as a lead teacher in a family childcare home with a minimum of 2 children, all of whom are ages birth to 5 and who are not relatives of the candidate. In the case of the home visitor setting, I repeat, the home visitor setting is special because the candidate doesn't work directly with the children, but with the adults in those homes. This is for adults who stay in their home with children birth to 5, and the home visitor comes home to educate and provide skills and knowledge to the adults in that home. So the candidate who is applying for the home visitor credential should be working in a home visiting program. Candidates should have the home visitor competency standards book, that is purple. The professional portfolio that they have prepared should be based on the requirements in that book, the home visitor CDA competency standards book. And the candidate will be observed conducting one home visit with one family that has children who are ages between birth and 5 years old. So that ends that portion, and now Raquel is going to talk to us about how do we schedule the verification visit, and she's going to take us all the way to something called the pre-visit checklist. Raquel?
Thanks, Vilma. So as Vilma just went over, selecting that credential type at the very beginning of your application is critical. You want to double check that the credential type you've selected on your application matches what you're actually intending to apply for. If it doesn't, you definitely need to correct that prior to scheduling your verification visit. I think we have a lot of people who confuse family child care for a center-based setting that has children ages birth to 5, but family child care really means someone who has a program within their home. So it is tied to a very specific setting. So I just wanted to, one, call that out, that if you work in a center, you can only select between the 2 center-based credentials. Family childcare is intended for people who have programs within their homes. And if you notice that you mistakenly selected the wrong credential type, don't schedule anything, call the council to have that corrected before scheduling your visit. It can be corrected after scheduling your visit, but it can lead to a lot of complications on your application and potentially having to pay additional fees. So just be real careful when you're selecting that credential type. So talking about scheduling your visit. Once you've received your ready to schedule notice and you're ready to schedule your verification visit, there are a few things that you want to think about. You want to consider your setting or program. You need to think about is there a quiet or private place where the PD specialist will be able to review the professional portfolio and conduct the reflective dialogue. Those are 2 things that need to be done in a quiet, separate area. You also want to consider your daily schedule. What would be the best time for the PD specialist to conduct the observation of you working with the children? What's a good time where the PD specialist will be able to see you conducting a variety of activities? You also want to review the comprehensive scoring instrument that is in the back of each of those competency standards books, because that is what the PD specialist will be using to evaluate your work as a candidate. So while that instrument is blank, you can review it as much as you would like. Thinking about, again, giving you clues in terms of what the PD specialist expects to see. And then lastly, you want to become familiar with the reflective dialogue process. What do you need to do to prepare for that experience? And all of that is contained within that competency standard book that you use to prepare for the CDA assessment. Some additional things that you need to think about in terms of your director. You will need to ask your director, will there be a quiet space where the PD specialist can conduct parts of the verification visit with me privately? Who is going to cover my classroom or group during that reflective dialogue process? Because again, The candidate cannot have the reflective dialogue in the classroom. They have to come out of the classroom. So you need to plan for coverage. Will arrangements be made so that I can be the lead teacher during the observation? A lot of times candidates, when they apply, are not lead teachers. They may be assistants, they may be volunteers, they may even hold a completely different position in the program, but during the observation, prior arrangements need to be made for the candidate to be acting as the lead teacher during that observation, because that's actually what the credential endorses. If you're awarded the credential, it means that you've proven that you can act in the position of a lead teacher. And you can also ask your director for their opinion in terms of when they think the best time is to schedule the verification visit. So some things to think about prior to actually sending a request or scheduling with your PD specialist. So how do you go about scheduling? Well, you do have to use the interactive scheduling tool within your online account to schedule your verification visit. And the system is set up so that either the candidate or the PD specialist can send a visit request date and time. So either one can log into their online account, and in the verification visit information section is where they can go back and forth sending each other requests. And we can see here a sample of the emails that the system will trigger depending on if you are the candidate receiving a request or if you are a PD specialist receiving a request. But you will get an email letting you know that if you're the candidate, that the PD specialist has sent you a visit request. Please log into your account to review the date and time. And you will have the option of accepting the visit, declining the visit, or declining and sending an alternate date and time. What's important to note is this process can go back and forth until someone officially accepts the date and time. And the visit is not considered officially scheduled until someone actually does accept the requested date and time in the system. And so now I think Vilma's going to talk a little bit about that pre-visit checklist.
Okay. So the pre-visit, I think, okay, the pre-visit checklist. So Raquel explained to you that if you have scheduled the verification visit, and now when you agree on a time and a day that you are going to have your verification visit, before this happens, the PD specialist is required to complete and submit a pre-visit checklist at least 48 hours before your verification visit. So the professional development specialist is responsible for contacting the candidate by phone and to complete the pre-visit checklist. Basically, the PD specialist is making sure that the candidate is ready. So the PD specialist needs to confirm the candidate meets all the requirements, that is prepared for the visit, that has made all the arrangements that Raquel talked about with the center, the program, that the program will provide a quiet space for the PD specialist to review the professional portfolio, that the candidate will be acting as the lead teacher during the observation, and that the program has made arrangements for the candidate to be out of the classroom for 1 hour for the reflective dialogue. Pre-verification, the pre-visit checklist cannot be completed via email or text. It has to be completed by phone, via phone. So in addition to what I mentioned before, the PD specialist also needs to confirm the setting and the language specialization that the candidate listed on the application to make sure that they're both in the same note, right? The candidate has the correct competency standards book, that the professional portfolio is completed, that the ages of the children in the candidates group and in the classroom are the same as the ones that have been given to her, and will remind the candidate the following to bring for the verification visit: a picture ID, their professional portfolio, and the original book, the competency standards book, because the PD specialist is going to take out the pages on the back of the book for the comprehensive scoring instrument, because this PD specialist is going to use this instrument during the verification visit to record the recommended scores. So once the PD specialist submits the completed pre-visit checklist, the candidate will receive a confirmation email. This confirmation email must be received at least 48 hours prior to the scheduled verification visit to take place. If the pre-visit checklist is not completed and submitted at least 48 hours, like as I mentioned before, prior to the scheduled visit, the visit has to be rescheduled. Okay, so it's very important that this happens. So let's talk about the actual verification visit. What happens when the PD specialist comes? What happens on that day? So some reminders. The morning of the verification visit, the candidate will receive an email reminding them that they have a visit scheduled for that day. That the PD specialist has 2 business days to submit the results once it's done. If the visit will not occur that day, they must officially reschedule within the system. Remember, that has to be done always within the system. And that the candidate should contact the council if they do not receive an email within 2 business days confirming that the results have been submitted. So once the verification visit is completed, the candidate will receive an email saying, confirming your results were submitted. Okay, this is how it's in English and in Spanish, as you can see here. So the PDS arrives on site in your program, and of course the PDS must arrive early to ensure that the verification visit starts at the scheduled time. The PD specialist may allow the candidate like a 15-minute grace period to arrive, like if the candidate is late. But if the candidate is not there and after 15 minutes the PD specialist is still waiting, the PD specialist may leave. The PD specialist introduces herself or himself to the director and the candidate and presents an ID and asks for the candidate ID. So before they begin the verification visit, the PD specialist asks the candidate for the original competency standards book. And the PD specialist will verify that this book matches the type of credential the candidate is applying for. It takes the comprehensive scoring book instrument from the back of the book, as I explained before, and it's going to take and then gives the book back to the candidate at some point. And this is how the instrument looks like. So candidates have this instrument all the time until the verification visit, right? So the candidates should know that it's in the back of the book, and we have some recommendations for that too. So the PD specialist also will ask the candidate to please provide the PD specialist with a professional portfolio. And here you have some images of some samples of how portfolios may look, but every candidate has to follow their own creativity to produce their own portfolio. It is not how it looks, but does it meet the requirements? That is the most important thing. So the first portion of this assessment takes place of the verification visit. Remember that was ROR. The first R was to review the professional portfolio. So the review of the professional portfolio takes place in a private room with no interruptions, and the PD specialist spends approximately 1 hour reviewing the professional portfolio. The candidate is not there. The candidate may be somewhere else working or taking a break, etc. But the PD specialist needs privacy to review the portfolio. So when they review the portfolio, the PD specialist is going to make sure that the portfolio requirements are met. Reviews all resource items in the resource collection, the 6 reflective statements of competence, reads the professional philosophy statement, reviews the documentation verifying the 120 hours of training. In addition, the PD specialist is verifying that the portfolio is prepared based on the credential type and also the language of the specialization the candidate selected for in the application, right? So based on the preparation of the professional portfolio, based on language specialization, if a candidate is doing an assessment in English only, we call it monolingual when it's just one language. So if the candidate is applying just for English, right? as the language of the specialization. The following items in the portfolio, in the professional portfolio, must be presented in English. The 6 reflective statements of competence, the resource collection, the professional philosophy statement. If the candidate is applying for monolingual other language, so it's not applying for English, it's applying for another language that is not English, right? The following items must be presented in another language. The 6 reflective statements of competence and the resources directly used with children and families, like the weekly plan, the 9 learning experience activities, bibliography of the books, the children's books, family resource guide, and the professional philosophy statement must be presented in the other language. And finally, for bilingual candidates who apply in 2 languages, English and another language, the following items must be presented in English and the other language. The 3 reflective statements of competence in English and 3 in the other language. The resources used directly with children and families, like the weekly plan, the 9 learning activities, the bibliography of the 10 children's books, and the family's resource guide, as well as the professional philosophy statement, can be either in either of the 2 languages. This information is in the candidate's competency standards book on page 32. So if you want to go back and read more in detail these requirements. So what are the violations? What the PD specialist should not do, and you should be aware of this too. The PD specialist is not allowed to take the portfolio off-site, cannot take it to her home or his hotel room or anywhere. It has to be reviewed on-site. The PD specialist should not make copies of any part of the portfolio, should not ask you, can you make me a copy of this? No, that is a violation of the procedure. The PD specialist is not allowed or should not inform the candidate the documents that are missing or the documents that are incorrect. Okay. And lastly, the PD specialist should not ask the candidate to email or send any missing things. Okay, whatever you have on that day is what counts. Nothing, the only ones who can ask for anything after the verification visit are the officials of the council. And let's talk about the next part of the verification visit. Remember ROR? We checked already the R, review the portfolio. Now we go to the O.
Vilma,
yes?
we
Questions?
do have, yes, we have a question. What documentation format is approved for clock hours of training? So basically they're asking about training documentation to prove that you have 120 hours of training. Right. So the council does accept 3 forms of official documentation. One is a college or university transcript from an accredited college or university, or a certificate of training, or we also accept letters of training on official letterhead directly from the training agency. There are some other requirements in terms of the documentation, in terms of what needs to be included on that documentation to be accepted, but those are the 3 official forms of documentation that we accept. We accept college transcripts, certificates, or a letter on letterhead from the training organization. And then we also accept the professional development record from certain state registries. The council has entered into a partnership with the National Workforce Registry, and there is a process that the state registries go through with the National Workforce Registry to have their training transcript approved by the National Workforce Registry. If your state has gone through that process, then that is a 4th form of documentation that can be submitted. In order to know whether or not your state is approved, you can go to the council's website. We do have that information available on the website. It is only a few states that do have approved registries. So if you do submit your registry in your portfolio and your state is not an approved registry, that documentation will not be accepted. So just make sure that you do view our council website to see if your state is listed under one of the approved registries.
Thank you so much. Any other questions?
I think I saw one in the chat instead of the questions. Let me see. Hold on.
Oh, okay. Remember to write your questions on the question and answer feature that you have on your screen. We really cannot be reading
Yes.
chat.
Okay, here it is. I found it. Does it matter whether you complete the exam or the verification visit? Does the order matter in which you complete these? It doesn't matter. You can complete either one in any order. The key is that you must complete them by your 6-month deadline. So just make sure that you're aware of your 6-month deadline, that you've completed both by that deadline date. And that's it for now.
Okay, thank you. So now we have moved to the second part of the verification visit, the observation. So the PD specialist will come to your classroom or group and will observe the candidate one at a time. During the observation, the PD specialist should sit in an area of the classroom where he or she can have a very good view, can hear what the candidate is saying and the children, but it's also inconspicuous. That means the PD specialist cannot be intervening, cannot be, asking questions or telling the teacher anything. Only the teachers that are typically present in the classroom or in the group should be present during the observation. The center director should not be present during the observation. Okay. So the observation lasts a minimum of 2 hours. The PD specialist observes the candidate working with the children, like Raquel said, as the lead teacher, regardless of your position. For those 2 hours, you have to lead the activities, and the experiences. During the observation, the candidate, you have to use the language listed on your application. And the PD specialist must observe the candidates interacting with the children enough time in order to be able to score the candidate in the different areas of the comprehensive scoring instrument. And during the observation, the PD specialist also looks for consistent performance while evaluating the candidates in the 13 functional areas. When the PD specialist reviews the portfolio, they also are going to be using the comprehensive scoring instrument to give you scores for your portfolio. And for the observation also, they have to score your performance as a candidate based on that instrument. What are considered violation of procedures during this observation? PD specialists should not be able to interact with the candidate or the children during the observation. In other words, the PD specialist cannot ask you, why are you doing that? Why don't you do this instead of this, Or I think this. They cannot interfere, right? They cannot interact with your children as a candidate. The usage of cell phones is forbidden. You should not be using, the PD specialist should not be using the cell phone during the observation, and the cell phones should be put away. Also, the PD specialist should not bring their own child or anyone else, boyfriend, spouse, friend, to your verification visit. That is considered a violation of procedures. And now we go to the reflective dialogue with Raquel, and we will come back. Thank you. The reflective dialogue, the last R, right? ROR.
Yep, thank you, Vilma. So the reflective dialogue is the last piece of the verification visit. And this is also a time when the candidate will need to come out of the classroom. So that's when you have to take into consideration that coverage, making sure that you have coverage in your classroom the day of your verification visit so that you can leave your room and go into a private room with the PD specialist. And this is usually about an hour. It usually lasts about an hour. And the purpose of the reflective dialogue is for the specialist and the candidate to discuss areas of strength and areas of growth with the purpose of setting some professional goals for the candidate. During the reflective dialogue, the PD specialist may ask open-ended questions that are related to the information in the the comprehensive scoring instrument, if they feel that they still had not seen enough potentially to score a candidate in a particular area, but these are open-ended questions. In addition, they will complete what is called the reflective dialogue worksheet. This is one of the required forms that is found in the competency standards book. And during the reflective dialogue, the PD specialist will help the candidate complete sections 2 and 3. And here we can see them highlighted. Section 1 should already have been completed by the candidate and should be in the professional portfolio. But during the reflective dialogue, the PD specialist will help the candidate complete the form. And the final step would be that the candidate and the PD specialist will sign the form so that the candidate can keep the completed form for future reference. In terms of the language of the reflective dialogue, similar to the preparation of the professional portfolio being tied to the language specialization, so the language that the candidate is required to consistently use with the children, the reflective dialogue is also conducted based on the language specialization. So if a candidate is applying monolingual English, that means that the reflective dialogue will be conducted only in English. And that would go, for example, if we have a candidate, let's say, who speaks French, but they are applying in English because that is the language they use in their daily work, and they happen to select a PD specialist who is bilingual in English and French as well. During that reflective dialogue, even though it may be, your first nature or your second nature to just switch to French because you both speak French, unfortunately, for the reflective dialogue, they have to stick to English because that is the language specialization of the application. Similarly, if the candidate has chosen to apply monolingual in another language, let's say Somali, the reflective dialogue will be conducted in Somali. And if a candidate selects a bilingual option, English and another language, then the PD specialist will be the one responsible for switching back and forth between the two languages, and the candidate would be expected to answer in both languages any questions or any conversations they have, because they're still evaluating the candidate's performance in the two languages. Okay, let's talk about some potential violations during the reflective dialogue that may occur. So the reflective dialogue is not intended to be a time for the PD specialist to tell the candidate everything they did wrong during the observation, or to criticize the program, or what was wrong in their classroom setup, or what interactions may have been inappropriate during the observation. It's also not a time, though, for the PD specialist to say, you did a great job, you passed the observation, I'm going to recommend that you get your CDA. Even though those types of comments, the last comments, may seem harmless, it implies that that the candidate has, quote, passed the visit, or that they are going to get their credential. And ultimately, the specialist is really just there to collect information for the council, and the council is the one who will make that final decision. So even small statements like that potentially are violations of procedure. So some recommendations. Before the verification visit, the candidate should review your CDA verification visit section of the Competency Standards book. And it basically outlines what we just went over today in terms of the review, observe, reflect model, and some of the things that should be happening during each of those sections. Here we have one page, I believe in the Competency Standards book, it's actually 2 full pages that talks about the verification visit experience. Also, the candidate should review that comprehensive scoring instrument in the back of the book. We've talked about that several times, or we've mentioned it several times today. And this is the scoring tool that the PD specialist is going to be using. So why not look at it? If you have it and it's blank, it really does give you a good idea in terms of what that specialist will be looking for, and potentially give you some pointers of where you may need to improve prior to your visit. Because again, you have the Competency Standards book from the very beginning of the process. It's a required purchase. You use it to put together your portfolio, to be aware of what the requirements are. So you do have that book a long time, and the comprehensive scoring instrument is blank. So as long as it's blank, you can look at it to, again, give you an idea of what is going to be happening during the observation piece. In terms of scheduling, you want to avoid scheduling the visit on a day where there's a program-wide event or a special event for various reasons. One, because the specialist will not be able to observe you in your regular schedule. And the idea is that the specialists come during a regular day where there are no special events and you're able to follow your regular schedule. You also don't want to plan it towards the end of the year because that's when you tend to have low attendance. And I think we spoke about the minimal requirement earlier for each of the credential types. There is a minimum number of children that have to be present during the observation. So scheduling that towards the end of the year, you run the risk of not having enough kids present for the observation to take place. You also want to schedule it during a time when the specialist will be able to observe you conducting a wide variety of activities. And then lastly, schedule your visit as soon as possible. Even if you're scheduling it again weeks or months in advance, you just want to make sure that you're on that PD specialist schedule because the PD specialists usually have full-time jobs. They are contracted by the council to conduct these visits, but they tend to have full-time jobs, but their schedule also fills up with other candidates. So if you leave it to the last minute, there is a possibility that the specialist will no longer have availability on their schedule. And I believe this is Puma now.
Okay, so wrapping up, once you complete your verification visit, the PD specialist will thank the candidate, the director, if the director is still around. The PD specialist is not going to be able to share feedback with the director or anyone else regarding the candidate's performance during the verification visit. The PD specialist will let the candidate know that they will submit the results of the verification visit to the council, and the council will make the credentialing decision. And the PD specialist will inform the candidate and the director that the role in the assessment process has ended and that any further questions, issues should be directed to the council. So after the verification visit, the candidate can call us, and not the role of the PD specialist has ended. So now we have the results, within the 2 days, the PD specialist has to send the results to us. And once the results are received, the candidate will receive a confirmation email like this. Okay. And that the results have been received. And then at the council, we make a credentialing decision whether to award the credential if we have enough pieces of evidence, that tell us from the exam and the verification visit that the candidate has demonstrated competence. We award the credential. The candidate is informed of the decision via email, and then the credential gets to the candidate by postal service. If the candidate has shown that they still need more training, they get a letter explaining that they did not get a credential. It's a denial letter, and they also in that letter explains that they can appeal. If they find that there were violations, if they think that something was violated in the process, they can appeal. But the appeals are only presented based on grounds of possible violations. Okay, so if they candidate decides to do that, they have, I believe, 30 days to appeal this decision. Okay, so if the appeal is granted, the council will let the candidate know what are the next steps. And if the appeal is denied, then the candidate, I believe, can appeal again, but that appeal is final. So this is, we always work with candidates and we support candidates so that they can be successful. And actually the denial rate is very minimum, right, Raquel? I believe that we're now on the 6% or something like that.
That's between 7 and 10%, but yes, our denial rate is very small.
Very small, yeah. Okay, so, and that concludes that presentation. We want to know if you have any questions. Raquel, do we have any questions on the questions and answers?
Yep, somebody is asking how long does it take for the council to make a decision about credentialing after the visit and exam have been completed. So typically after we receive the scores of both the exam and the verification visit, it takes about 10 business days, but oftentimes candidates hear a lot sooner. It really is dependent on the number of applications that we have at the time that the candidate completes both their exam and verification visits, but typically about 10 business days to hear back. So if you've completed your exam and your verification visit and you haven't received a credentialing decision after 10 business days of completing the last part, you can always call our customer support department to check on the status of that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope, I don't see any.
Okay, well, Raquel can tell us about this, and then I have another thing to talk to you about.
Yes. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that we do have a customer support department. Our customer support department is open Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we do have agents available who speak English and Spanish. You can see the number here. It's 800-424-4310. And our hold times are actually at the moment, on the heavier times, it's about 1 minute to speak to a live agent, but usually throughout the day, consistently, since I believe it's February, the hold times are under 30 seconds to speak to an actual live agent. So it is fairly easy to get through to speak with an agent with any questions you might have. And I strongly encourage you all to use that customer support number, particularly if you have a question about the process, even when selecting a training agency. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of increased incidents of people giving out false information, saying they're affiliated with the council and so forth. So even when you're selecting a training agency, if you have a question about that, please give our customer support department a call. Now, the council doesn't approve or endorse any training agencies, but if someone claims that they're affiliated with the council, or even if they say they're a PD specialist, if you can't look them up in our system, just call us to double check. But we do have those agents available to answer your call. They also have an email, which is cdafeedback@cdacouncil.org, and typically you will receive a response same day. But if not, it can take up to 2 business days to get a response back via email.
Okay. So I want to share with you some great news too. At the beginning of the presentation, I said that the recording of the session is going to be available for those who are members of CAN. And for those who are not, I encourage you to join CAN. CAN is the Council Alumni Network. It's a social platform, but it's more than social. It's social/professional platform, something like a Facebook, but it's sponsored by the council. It's free and it's great. I have so much to say about CAN. It's free. You can take full advantage of this membership because you have so much to win, nothing to lose. You can be connected with colleagues, and other people who participate in this network. We have events that are private for members only. You get to hear and see people that normally you only see very far in a conference, and you have to pay for that, right? We feature events with topics that are extremely important in the field. We have different groups that you can make your own group or you can join another group. For example, we have a group for home visitors. We have a group for Spanish speaking community called Lazos Latinos. We have different groups. We have groups that live in the north, south, east, west, etc. And then you can network with other professionals. You can exchange activities. You can look for employment. You can post employment ads, etc. So if you want to join, and then you get the invitations, for all these events, including these webinars, but also you get the recording of the webinars. So if you want to join, please you join at councilcan.org, and then you follow, the instructions. So, and Raquel mentioned that link, or that address, email address where you can also find customer support. You have to also, you can visit us on our website, because in our website, we have a lot of information that is the latest of the latest. You can subscribe to our Council Link newsletter, also free. You can join us in social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of that. And as Raquel always says, you talk about the Facebook, Raquel, all the time, right? Because the Facebook also promotes the events, correct?
Yep, that's correct. And actually, someone was asking about CAN. If you don't have a CDA yet, can you join CAN?
Unfortunately not. The
Right.
CAN is for people who have a CDA and for anybody else that belongs to the community of CDAs, like advisors, instructors, mentors, people who work, directors, But as soon as you get your CDA, please join. We will be so happy to welcome you.
Yeah. And then also, in terms of Facebook, that is, if you're not able to join CAN, you don't receive the announcements. Facebook
Right.
is a good alternative, because we do always announce the webinars that we're having on Facebook, so you can register through there. And I do see someone asking about the video recordings, and yes, unfortunately, you can attend webinars during the live presentations, but to have the recording, to have access to the recording and can, unfortunately, you do have to be a member. And if you don't have a CDA, you cannot join. We are working to see other alternatives in terms of how we can post those in a different manner and have them available to everyone online. But for right now, unfortunately, the recordings themselves are only available to CAN members.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't want to say goodbye because I want you to ask questions. So, but we have, we have finished early. You're very, very good. You understood a lot of things. Don't forget this number. It's very important. Okay, this is the latest information is that the waiting time is less than 1 minute. But if it's, if it's a high volume of calls, um, no, it's 1 minute if it's high volume, but 30 seconds, about 30 seconds in regular times.
Correct.
So, yeah, call. Any more questions that you see, Raquelita?
No, none.
Okay. Well, I'm going to leave you with this can so you can join. And also with this information about how to get in touch with us. We are here to support everybody's work. We're not here to put barriers. We want everybody to succeed, and we want all teachers everywhere. If you touch the lives of children, regardless of where you are or the language that you're using daily with children and families, we want you to demonstrate that you are wonderful, that you're competent, and you can earn your CDA. So please use all the tools and all the information we gave you, and please pursue your CDA because it's one of the pathways to get to great success in the future. Thank you so much for attending, Raquelita.
Yep, thanks so much for being with us today, and we hope to see you in some of our future webinars.
Yeah, stay tuned because we have more webinars before the year ends, right? Okay. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Goodbye.